steel twisted into a crooked pile, guy wires snapped, rust and ash stuck in every joint. The dish is half buried in dirt, pointing straight into the slope. We were following the old service road for shelters or fuel, not for this. The sky is that flat gray that never tells you what time it is anymore. It smells like wet dust and distant smoke. "Storm did that?" Jonah asks behind me. I step over a fallen section of lattice, boots sliding on loose stone. "Storm or artillery? Hard to say." He grunts and swings his pack off his shoulder so he can squeeze between two bent crossbeams. Hannah hangs back near the road with the cart, one hand on the worn foam grip, the other close to her rifle. Mateo stands beside her, scanning the tree line. The infected do not move much this far out unless something draws them, but habits keep you breathing. There should be a base nearby. The map we found in the ranger station marked this place with a faded symbol. Comms node, handwritten in the margin. We expected a shack, maybe some solar panels to strip. Not this. I pick my way up the slope, following the broken spine of the tower to where the concrete pad disappears under dirt. Grass and scrub have grown over most of it. A length of coaxial cable snakes into the ground and vanishes in a cracked rectangle of poured concrete. There is a bulge where the earth sagged inward. "Here," I call. Jonah climbs the last few steps of slope, breathing through his teeth. His jacket is patched at the elbows with different colors of fabric, and the old unit patch on his shoulder is almost white now. He squats beside the depression and scrapes at the soil with a gloved hand. Clay flakes away, revealing corroded steel. "Hatch," he says. The word pulls Hannah up the hill with the cart. Mateo follows, checking the angle back toward the road. The wheels bump over broken stone, water sloshing in the jugs tied to the side. "Military?" Mateo asks. "Looks it," Jonah says. "See those bolts? Blast rated. Not for a storage cellar." I crouch and brush away more dirt. The steel is dull and pitted, but the recessed handle is intact, only clogged with clay. No obvious lock. The tower must have collapsed years ago. If anyone used this place during the outbreak, they did a good job hiding the entrance again. "If it is a bunker," Hannah says, "it is buried for a reason." Jonah studies the horizon. No movement. Only the wind shifting through dead brush and the distant drone of flies from somewhere downslope. "We have 3 days of water and 4 days of food," he says. "We sleep under trucks and in drainage ditches. If there is a proper roof under here and it is empty, we cannot just walk past it." I know what he is not saying. Winter is not here yet, but the nights have started to cut through jackets again. Open ground means fires you cannot risk, shelters that somebody else might want more than you. "Let us at least open it," I say. Between the 4 of us, we scrape, pry, and dig until the edges of the hatch show. My fingers sting where the gloves rub thin seams, but I keep going. Jonah finds a buried handle on the opposite side and works it free. When he pulls, the metal only shifts a little, like it has settled against something underneath. "Stuck on the hinges," he mutters. "Help me." We all take positions around the edge and pull together. The steel groans, a deep, reluctant sound that echoes through the hillside. Clods of dirt crack loose and tumble into the dark gap as the hatch finally lifts. Cold air spills out, not fresh, but not rotten either. It smells of dust, oil, and old paper. The hinge screams all the way open. We all freeze and listen. Nothing, no answering sound, no shuffling, no voice, just the wind through busted tower ribs. A metal ladder disappears downward into dark. The faintest red glow touches its rungs. Emergency lights. "Power," I say. My voice sounds wrong to my own ears. Power means fuel, systems, air filters, radios. It also means someone either left in order or never left at all. Jonah looks into the opening for a full 10 count, then nods. Eli, you are on me. Mateo, watch the road. Hannah, keep the cart behind cover and stay topside until we clear the first level. If it smells bad, if you hear us coughing, you close this hatch again. Do not come down until I call up. Hannah studies his face. If I close it, how do I know you are not already gone? Jonah's jaw tightens a little. You listen. If you hear stumbling or scraping of boots without voices, you do not open it. If you hear me call your full name, you open it and be ready to move. That is all you get. She nods once. I swing my pack around and check the straps. Batteries, extra light, notebook, pen. The small handheld radio sits in the outer pouch, dead for months. I still carry it out of habit. Maybe somewhere there is a signal again. I clip a flashlight to my chest harness and switch it to its lowest setting, just enough to catch the ladder rungs and the smooth concrete walls. Then I swing my legs over and start to climb down. The air cools as I descend. The steel under my boots feels firm, well anchored. No rust flakes off. Someone built this to last through more than one war. 10 feet down, 20. Then my boots touch another hatch. This one open, its circular lid swung aside. I step off the ladder into a cylindrical chamber barely wider than my outstretched arms. Red emergency strips run around the wall at shoulder height, alternating with stenciled warnings. Pressure lock. Keep sealed during alert. Jonah drops in behind me, landing with a dull thud. He scans the space, one hand on his rifle. There is another ladder section leading further down and a wheel valve beside it. The air is chilly and dry, with a metallic tang that sits at the back of my throat. Smell? He asks quietly. Filters, I say. Not used hard in a while. No rot. He nods and leans over the lower hatch. The red glow continues downward. I go first, he says. He climbs. I follow. The second shaft ends in an open rectangle that leads into a corridor. White panels overhead. Red emergency strips along the floor. Doors left and right with small reinforced windows darkened by whatever is inside. I step out and stand very still, ears straining for anything beyond our own movements. There is a hum under the silence, not loud but steady, machinery. Jonah sweeps his light across door labels, Briefing Room A, OPIA Center, comm server. Then there is the round steel of a main blast door farther down, slightly ajar. He glances at me and tilts his head toward it. I nod. We move together, boots soft on the rubber-coated floor. Dust streaks along the edges, but there are gaps. Someone has walked here more recently than the collapse of the tower outside. My fingers drift near the grip of my pistol. It is not loaded with much, but what we have is what we have. I keep the flashlight low and aim mostly at the floor, letting the red emergency LEDs do most of the work. At the blast door, Jonah puts 2 fingers on the steel and pushes. It swings inward an inch, creaking softly. The sound runs into the dark beyond and does not return. Huge room. He eases through. I follow close. The operations center looks frozen mid-task. A raised platform in the center holds a horseshoe of desks facing a wall of dead monitors. World map, regional overlays, magnetic counters still stuck to gridded boards showing unit positions long obsolete. Coffee cups with dried residue in the bottom sit beside yellowed folders. Some screens are still on. Not the big displays, but smaller ruggedized terminals along the back wall. Data pages scroll in slow, repeated cycles. System status summaries. ventilation readouts, power usage graphs. A server rack hums quietly, green and amber lights blinking in a rhythm that feels strange after months of dead cities. Generator is still running, I whisper. Or something on grid backup, Jonah replies. But if the tower is down, they are not talking to anyone. I move toward the nearest terminal. The keyboard is worn around the WASD keys and the spacebar, which tells me someone used this for more than dry reports. Probably a board operator passing time between alerts. I hit a key. The system reacts instantly, screen shifting to a menu. Auth required. Below that, a small prompt. Guest access, run diagnostics, play public messages. Public messages? I say. Jonah gives a small shrug. Try it. I tap the key under play. The speakers crackle. For a second, there is only noise, the faint hiss of an empty line. Then a voice, clipped and careful. Male, mid-40s by the sound, some kind of officer drawl. This is Lieutenant Colonel Harris, Acting Commander, Site Echo 3. This recording is for any authorized personnel who access this facility after shutdown. The sound fills the quiet. Jonah straightens a little, eyes narrowing. We are no longer under external command, the voice continues. Last authenticated transmission from Division was received 74 hours ago and consisted of automated code only. No live confirmation followed. As of 0300 local, we assume higher headquarters is compromised or non-functional. The word non-functional hangs in the air. We have sealed the main access points, Harris says. Standard procedure. However, the situation inside the bunker is now a greater threat than the infected outside. Someone among us has been tampering with the environmental controls. I glance at Jonah. His face is set, eyes on the speaker grill. 2 days ago, Colorado 2 levels began to spike in Sector C, Harris continues. Investigation revealed bypassed dampers and manually disabled scrubbers. Repairs were made and logs locked. Today, the same pattern occurred in Sector A, which contained non-essential personnel at the time. There is a pause. Papers rustle faintly near the microphone. This was not a system fault, he says. Manual access panels were opened. Safety interlocks were bypassed with knowledge that only trained staff possess. Someone here is trying to reduce headcount by shutting down ventilation in occupied compartments. My mouth goes dry. I picture a row of bunks behind a sealed hatch, vents going still while people sleep. No screaming, no gunshots, just less oxygen every hour. Harris speaks again, voice rougher. We confronted the engineering section. Chief Rollins denies involvement and has locked his team in generator room 2. Medical reports no sign of infection in any of them, or in anyone else. This is not about the virus. This is about food, water, and time. The hum of the server rack feels louder now. We have 47 personnel on site, he says. Supplies for 20 at reduced consumption over 6 months. There are those who think the math should be corrected. I will not authorize the deliberate killing of our own people for ration calculations. But I may not remain in command much longer. He exhales near the microphone. If you are hearing this, it means the bunker outlived us. There may still be traps in the vent systems, manual overrides, sealed compartments that never reopened. Check every damper by hand before you trust this place. And if you find Rollins or anyone from his section still alive, proceed with extreme caution. There is a short burst of static. Then the recording ends. The speakers hiss, then fall quiet. My tongue feels thick when I finally swallow. So, I say, we found the place where the officers lost control of their own air. Jonah rubs a thumb across his jawline. 20 years in uniform, and I never heard of a site doing that. It makes sense, I say, but I hate that I mean it. Shut doors, limited supplies, no oversight. At some point, numbers on a clipboard start looking more real than faces. He glances around the ops center again, as if expecting someone to step out from behind a console with a sheepish look. No one does. First, we find the generator, he says. If the air is still moving, it is because that thing is still running. If it is still running, either the saboteur died, or he is keeping it going for himself. We need to know which. We back out of the operations room. Hannah's voice cracks over the open hatch above, faint but clear. Status? Main hall clear, Jonah calls, voice echoing. Power on, no bodies, yet. I hear the scrape of boots on the ladder. A moment later, Hannah drops into the corridor, followed by Matteo. They both move carefully, eyes wide as they take in the sealed doors and red-lit walls. This feels wrong, Hannah murmurs. Everything feels wrong, Matteo says. This at least has walls. He says it with a forced lightness that does not reach his eyes. We move deeper into the bunker together. Engineering is usually near the back. Jonah reads door labels as we pass. Medical, barracks A, mess, storage. Each has a wheel handle and a small window. None of the windows show movement. Some are fogged with condensation from the other side. At generator room 1, Jonah stops and tests the handle. It spins easily. He eases the wheel, pulls the door inward an inch, and sniffs. Warmth and the smell of diesel drift out. Running, he says. He opens the door fully. The generator room is cramped, lined with tanks and pipes. The main diesel unit is smaller than I pictured, but it is humming away, exhaust routed into a scrubber system along the ceiling. Status lights on the control panel are in the green, fuel gauge at maybe 30%. Enough for weeks at low load if we are careful. No bodies here either. Just an empty metal folding chair shoved into a corner and an open toolbox on the floor. Matteo steps in and runs a hand over the nearest fuel tank. Warm, he says. Somebody has been watching this thing. This is not decades of unattended runtime. Jonah nods slowly. Harris was not talking about ancient history. This site stayed alive into the outbreak. Maybe well into it. Hannah steps back into the hall and looks upward, toward the invisible outside world. So where is everyone? I answer without thinking, maybe in the compartments that never reopened. Her shoulders stiffen. She does not reply. We do not open any more doors yet. Jonah calls for a brief halt in the corridor and hands out tasks. Eli, your eyes are better for numbers than mine. Start with the environmental system. Find the main control and see what it thinks is happening. Matteo, make sure the blast doors are properly shut and that hatch is still clear. Hannah, check the storage rooms near here for food and water. Stick to ground level. No barracks yet. We do not need surprises in bunk beds. And you? I ask. Jonah looks down the hall toward a labeled stairwell. I find generator room 2. If Rollins locked himself in there, I want to know before he hears us walking around overhead. We all agree without much argument. He has the most field experience. He trusts me with consoles. The others know their roles. It feels almost normal, which in itself is strange after months of loose survival. The environmental controls are 3 doors down from the ops center, Environ/life support, painted in flaking black letters. Inside, the air is cooler and filled with a faint ozone smell. Racks of ducting rise into the ceiling, valves labeled with sector codes. The control panel on the far wall shows a simplified map of the bunker, each section outlined and color-coded from green to amber. Right now, most of it is green, but not all. Sector C is amber with a small warning icon pulsing steadily beside it. I step closer and study the indicators. Flow, reduced. CO2, elevated but stable. Vent dampers, partial. There is a list of alerts along the bottom of the screen. Manual override detected. Access panel 3C, logged by user, Rollins. Last activity timestamp, 21 days ago. 21 days, I whisper. That is recent enough for a body to still be soft behind a door. Recent enough for someone to still be walking around if he rationed carefully. I tap through the menus, careful not to confirm any commands I do not understand. The system happily shows me histories, graphs, and the status of scrubber cartridges. Carbon filters in sectors A and B are near end of life, but still operational. The outside intake is clear. At least according to these readings. There is a physical panel beside the screen with key switches and a big red emergency purge button that probably dumps outside air into all compartments at once. The key is missing. Someone walked off with the only way to hit that switch. On the wall near the duct racks, several access panels are labeled with sector codes. Panel 3C has new scratches around its screws, the paint rubbed clean by recent hands. I cross the room and press my ear to the metal plate. Nothing. The duct beyond is quiet. I back away, study the bolts, then decide I am not opening that until everyone is here. Hannah finds me minutes later. A small tower of ration boxes is stacked outside the life support door. Good news first, she says. Food, a lot of it. Nothing fancy, mostly sealed meals and crackers, but enough for 4 people for months if we are careful. Water drums as well. Some in metal, some plastic, all still sealed. Whoever was here did not run out of supplies first. What about bad news? I ask. She leans against the doorframe. Several doors are welded shut from the outside, not just locked, full beads across the seams. One of them has a sign scratched into the metal. Do not open, depleted. The word sits between us. Depleted, I repeat. Could mean supplies, she says, but we both know it does not. Jonah's boots are heavier than Hannah's. I hear him before I see him. He steps into the control room and closes the door behind him, almost gently. Generator room 2? I ask. He nods once. There is a faint gray smear on his sleeve that was not there before. Door is sealed from the inside. I knocked. Nothing. No movement. Panel shows it on independent ventilation. He cut himself off. Dead? Hannah asks. Either that or he does not care about visitors, Jonah says. The small inspection window is painted over from his side. Very neat. Single coat. No light inside. He looks at the console. Find anything entertaining? I tell him about Sector C, the manual overrides, the missing purge key. He listens without interrupting, then traces a finger along the map on the panel. Sector C is below us, he says. Secondary barracks, some storage, and a medical annex, according to the room labels. That is where Harris saw the first spike. And Rollins touched the vents there 3 weeks ago, I add. The system compensated, but only up to a point. If we open those doors and walk in without checking, we might walk into stale air. Hannah frowns. Is that enough to do anything serious? Jonah nods grimly. In a closed space? Yes. You go to sleep and do not wake up. No sound to warn anyone else unless they walk past and notice you missed a watch. For a while, we just listen to the steady hum of fans and the low whine of electronics. The idea that the air itself might not be safe feels worse than any clawing hand at a window. You cannot shoot air. We need to decide something, Hannah says quietly. Are we staying here? Where else? Mateo says from the doorway. He has a coil of rope over one shoulder. and a small bundle of dusty blankets in his arms. The blast doors are intact. The generator is running. There is food and water. Outside we have nights in culverts and days dodging infected through fields. Here we have filters and steel. And someone who thought suffocating people was a solution, Hannah says. That someone might be long gone, Mateo replies, or trapped behind his own paint. Jonah raises a hand. Enough. He looks at each of us in turn, as if weighing our faces against the risk. We cannot walk away from a place like this, he says, not when winter is coming and we have no other shelter marked. But we do not take it on faith. We sleep on the upper level only tonight. No welded doors, no unventilated compartments. Eli, you set up here for a bit and keep an eye on the enviro readouts. If anything shifts, you wake us. Mateo, you and Hannah pick one room for us to use as a temporary bunk. One way in, one way out, nothing behind us. We keep rotations. No one walks anywhere alone. And Sector C? I ask. He stares at the amber outline on the panel. We deal with that in daylight, with a mask, if we can improvise one. If there are bodies, we need to know. If there are survivors, we definitely need to know. For now, we stay away from any door marked with that letter. The day stretches and folds into small tasks. I sit at the console reading logs until the text starts to blur. Thousands of lines, status reports, maintenance entries, command notes. I learn that Harris was meticulous about writing everything down. He recorded every minor fluctuation, every complaint about noise or lighting. For the last 2 weeks of logs, his entries become more terse. More references to disputes, ration debates. Unauthorized meeting resolved appears several times. Rollins' name shows up whenever there is a change requested to power or air. Each time, Harris either approves under protest or blocks it outright. Then there is a final entry. Vent override request denied. Engineering personnel confined to Gen 2. After that, the logs go quiet except for automated notes, vent adjustments, alarm acknowledgements. Yet the timestamps keep advancing for days, then weeks. That means someone, somewhere in here, kept acknowledging those alarms so the system would stop beeping. Someone alive, at least until recently. I do not realize how long I have been reading until Hannah taps my shoulder. I flinch and knock a pen to the floor. It rolls under the console. Easy, she says. We found a room. Mess hall annex. No windows, no weld marks. One door. Tables and benches still bolted down. We dragged a few mattresses in from a nearby storage closet. It is not pretty, but it is clean enough. Any personal stuff? I ask. Nothing, she says. Some trays, cups, a few forks. No pictures, no clothes, no shoes. If anyone left in a hurry, they did not leave a trace in there. I stand and roll my shoulders. Joints pop. The idea of sitting for hours with my back to a doorway feels worse than any watch post outside. But we need sleep. How are the readings? She asks, nodding at the screen. Stable, I say. No new overrides. Sector C still flagged, but nothing spreading. Whoever was playing with the dampers stopped at that zone. Maybe he gave up, she says. Or he achieved what he wanted there and moved elsewhere, I reply before I can stop myself. Her jaw knots a little. Then we find him. Yes, I say, but not tonight. We shut the console down to standby, leaving the main status display on. The small map glows softly in the darkened room, green and amber eyes on the bunker's breath. We arrange shifts. Mateo insists on taking the first, claiming he is too wired to sleep anyway. Jonah takes second. I offer to take third, the dead hours when imagination tends to run. Hannah gets last watch before morning. We all know that if something goes wrong in the vent system, whoever is on watch might be the only one awake long enough to notice. No one says it out loud. The mess annex smells of old cooking oil and metal. We pulled the mattresses in and set them in a row along one wall, packs at our heads, boots near reach. The door wheel is polished where Jonah worked it open and closed a few times to be sure it moves easily. We lay down in our clothes. No one bothers with blankets at first. The air feels cool enough, and the concrete under the thin foam presses up through my spine in a way that tells me I will not be truly rested when I wake. But it is dry. No wind. No sound of distant groans or scraping on walls. I stare at the underside of a bolted table for a long time. The scratches there tell stories. Someone carved initials with a utensil. Another left a small tally of vertical lines, maybe counting days, maybe meals. Somewhere in the bunker, fans hum and valves adjust. The sound becomes a kind of background that fills in the silence where crickets and night traffic used to live. At some point, my thoughts unravel and join that sound. When I wake, I do not know what time it is. There is no natural light down here to anchor the hours. The single overhead fixture is off, but a thin band of red leaks under the door from the corridor. Someone must have dimmed the main hall to conserve power. Mateo is snoring softly on his mattress. Jonah's bed is empty. For a moment I feel disoriented, caught between the memory of open sky and this buried steel box. Then the smell of instant coffee drifts under the door and pulls me fully into now. I sit up and rub my hands over my face. Dry eyes, dry mouth. I push to my feet and step carefully between sleeping bodies to the door. When I crack it open, a warmer light spills in. Jonah is at one of the mess hall tables, mug in hand, a checklist spread out before him. The coffee pot sits on a portable stove unit he must have found in the kitchen. The line of his shoulders is relaxed but alert. "Morning," he says, or something that passes for it. "Anything?" I ask. "Quiet," he says. No alarms, no banging on doors, no change in air. I glance toward the corridor. "Mateo?" "In the radio room," Jonah says. He found a receiver that still works. No antenna after the tower fell, but he insisted on scanning. Habit. "It is not a bad habit," I say. "True," Jonah agrees. "But I told him to keep the transmitter off. No reason to announce ourselves yet." He pushes a chipped mug toward me. The coffee is thin and bitter, brewed from whatever grounds he found in a cabinet. But it is hot. I wrap my hands around it and let the warmth climb into my fingers. "Today we examine Sector C," he says. The words drop between us with more weight than the mug. I swallow a mouthful of coffee and set it down carefully. "We could leave it sealed," I say. "We have the upper level, the generator, the storage, and air routed through a section that someone already used to test his adjustments," Jonah says. "If there is a manual bypass still open down there, we cannot see it from the console alone. We need eyes on the actual vents. And if there are bodies or survivors, we need to know. We do not want a disease of any kind brewing in a shut compartment under our feet." He is right. I hate that he is right. But that has been most of our journey. "Do we have any masks?" I ask. "2 half masks from a maintenance kit," he says. "Filters are old, but better than nothing. We improvise the rest. Wet cloth if needed. We enter, we check vents first. If the air feels heavy, we do not linger." There it is again. The way he talks about air as if it has moods. We gather in the corridor near the stairwell that leads down to Sector C. Mateo arrives from the radio room, eyes brighter than usual. "Anything on the bands?" I ask. "Static mostly," he says. One faint voice repeating numbers on a loop, too weak to catch the full sequence. Could be an automated beacon or someone very far away with a small transmitter. Either way, nothing that changes our situation right now. Hannah adjusts the straps on one of the half masks. The rubber is stiff from age, but it still seals reasonably well around her face. She hands the other to Jonah. For myself, I tie a folded damp bandana across nose and mouth. It will not stop everything, but it will at least slow whatever the vents throw out first. Stay behind us, Jonah tells Mateo and Hannah. Eli and I go first. We check vents and doors. No one touches any wheel without my say. He looks each of us in the eye. If anyone starts to feel lightheaded, you speak up. Do not try to tough it out. That is how people fall asleep standing up. The stairwell to Sector C is narrower than the main one. Emergency lights flicker here, one of them stuttering at a slow, irregular pace that makes the shadows jump on the walls. The air changes as we descend. It grows slightly warmer, more still. At the bottom, a short corridor leads to a heavy blast door marked Sector C Main Access. A smaller warning sign has been bolted beneath the primary label. Vent settings manual, consult control before entry. That worked out well for them, Mateo mutters. Jonah studies the edges of the door. No weld marks, no dents. It has been opened and closed many times. The wheel turns without much resistance when he tests it. Fans first, I say through the cloth over my mouth. My voice sounds muffled and distant to my own ears. He nods and backs away from the door. To the side, a smaller passage leads toward what is probably a maintenance alcove. We follow it and find a panel much like the ones in life support, but this one has been stripped of its cover entirely. Ductwork exposed, dampers visible. The damper for C. Main is partly closed, not enough to shut airflow entirely, but enough to restrict it. Someone wedged a small piece of metal into the hinge assembly to prevent the automatic actuator from opening it fully. The wedge is clean, no dust on it. Recent, I say. Jonah pulls a small screwdriver from his pocket and reaches toward the wedge. Then he stops. If I pull this, air flows at full volume into Sector C, he says. If that space is full of stale air and the system is currently trying to bleed it off slowly, we might dump a lot of bad gas into the rest of the bunker. Or, I counter, this wedge is preventing the system from cleansing that space properly. That is what Harris complained about. Manual restriction where it should be open. Hannah shifts lightly behind us. So either way, we are guessing. Yes, I say. But we have the console upstairs to monitor overall levels. We pull this, we go check the panel, and if anything starts to climb, we shut the main intake to this sector and leave it sealed. Jonah considers that, then nods. Do it. He holds the duct steady while I work the wedge free. It resists for a moment, then comes loose with a scraping sound. The damper flexes slightly, then opens another few degrees on its own as the actuator arm pushes it. A faint rush of air passes my face, carrying a smell that is hard to define. Not rot, more like a closed room that has suddenly been reminded the world exists. Dust and old fabric. We wait in that cramped alcove for several minutes, listening, sniffing, scanning ourselves for any change. Nothing obvious happens. No dizziness, no sudden headaches. The background hum of fans continues. Back to the console, Jonah says. Move. We jog up the stairs, boots slapping against the steps, then cut through the main corridor to the life support room. The console responds instantly when I bring up the sector map. Sector C shifts from amber toward green in slow pulses. CO2 levels tick downward by small increments. Vent flow rises. No alarms appear in other sections. Hannah leans over my shoulder. Looks good. Or the system is misreporting, Mateo says. Stop borrowing trouble, Jonah says, though his voice is gentler than the words. For now, the numbers move in the right direction. We give it half an hour, then we open that door. The waiting is almost worse than any immediate danger. We pace the corridor. I check the numbers every few minutes, then force myself to step away so I do not hover and imagine patterns where there are none. Hannah tidies the storage area just to have something for her hands to do. Mateo returns to the radio console until Jonah calls him back. After 30 measured minutes, Sector C reads as green. Flow normal, CO2 levels within acceptable ranges. If there is a pocket of bad air down there, it is either gone or so small the system cannot see it. Time, Jonah says. We gather again at the top of the stairwell. Masks on, cloth damp, weapons checked. We descend. The blast door to Sector C opens with a low scrape when Jonah turns the wheel and pulls. A faint gust of cooler air brushes past us, carrying dust into the hallway. My eyes water behind the bandana for a moment, then clear. Beyond the door, the corridor extends in both directions, lined with more hatches. These are not welded. Most are marked with simple labels: Barracks C1, Storage CB Medical Annex. We move slowly, every footstep deliberate. Check vents first, Jonah reminds us. In the ceiling, small grills mark where air enters and exits each compartment. I hold my hand under the nearest one. There is a gentle flow, steady and neither too warm nor too cold. Good sign. At Medical Annex, the door stands slightly ajar. That detail pulls my attention the way a loose thread does on clothing. Someone left in a hurry, or someone wanted it to be easy to enter later. Stay sharp, Jonah says. He rests his hand on the door and listens. No sound comes through. He nods at me. I push the door slowly inward with 2 fingers, keeping my body behind the thicker section of frame. The medical annex is one long room with curtained cubicles along one side and cabinets along the other. A central desk holds scattered files and a tipped-over mug. The faint smell in here is sharper, antiseptic, and something older under it. Beds in the cubicles are empty, sheets tangled, some on the floor. A rolling stool lies overturned near a supply cabinet. On the wall, a whiteboard lists patient names and notes. Most of the notes stop mid-sentence. No bodies. Either they walked out under their own power, Hannah says quietly, or someone moved them later. She kneels to open a lower cabinet. Bandages, antibiotics, saline. Not much, but better than nothing. No blood anywhere. That is something. I move toward the far end of the room, where a door labeled Isolation leads to a smaller chamber. This door is closed, but not locked. When I lay my hand on it, the metal feels slightly colder than the rest. Jonah, I call. He joins me, giving the door a quick visual sweep. No weld marks. No warning signs beyond the usual biohazard sticker faded from age. Open it, he says. I turn the handle and pull. The isolation room is small, barely large enough for a single bed, monitoring equipment, and a chair. All are empty. The bed is stripped bare. No pillow, no blanket. The monitors on the wall are dark. On the far wall, a vent grill sits at head height. The screws around it are scratched. Someone removed and replaced this recently. The edges of the wall paint are nicked from a tool. Vent tampering point, I say, right over whoever was lying here. Jonah steps past me and studies the marks. So Rollins liked to work where no one was looking, or he came back here after the lockdown. Or someone else did, I say. We stand in that small room for a moment. listening to the faint hiss of airflow and the distant hum of the main system. From somewhere further down the Sector C corridor, metal clanks softly. Every head in the medical annex snaps up. Jonah raises a hand, palm out, and we freeze in place. The sound comes again, a faint, slow knock of metal against metal, with a small scrape afterward, as if someone is dragging something heavy and letting it bump each time. Not near, but not distant enough to dismiss. Infected? Mateo whispers. Infected do not usually keep rhythm, Jonah replies. Stay low. Move quiet. We ease back into the main corridor. The sound is clearer here, coming from the far end where storage and barracks C3 sit opposite each other. The lights flicker slightly, adding a stutter to the shadows. The noise stops as we approach. For several long breaths, nothing moves. Then a voice, rough and dry, floats down the hall. About time, it says. It is male, older, with a rasp that suggests long periods without conversation or hydration. It does not sound surprised. It sounds irritated. Jonah raises his rifle slightly, though he keeps the barrel angled toward the floor. Identify yourself, he calls. A dry laugh answers. After all that fuss upstairs, you should already know the name. Rollins, I say under my breath. Chief Warrant Officer Daniel Rollins, the voice says, louder now. Environmental systems, or what is left of them. Come into view, Jonah calls. Hands visible. Cannot, Rollins replies. There is that metallic scrape again. Door is stuck from your end. You welded it after you threw us in here, remember? He directs the last sentence towards some memory of Harris, not us. We exchange looks. The welded door, Hannah whispers. Jonah nods slowly. C3. We move closer. The door to barracks. C3 has a line of welding bead along its edges, but the metal is thin and patchy in places, as if whoever did it rushed. There is a small square cut into the lower section, barely larger than a food tray, currently covered by a scrap of plate bolted over it from the outside. That metal scrap is what has been knocking, judging by the scuff marks around its edges. Jonah stops 2 steps back from the door. Rollins, this is Sergeant Jonah Miles, formerly of the Signal Corps. The officers you knew are gone. We came in from the surface yesterday. We are not part of your command structure. There is a pause from inside. When Rollins speaks again, his tone has shifted. Less certain, more wary. Surface, he says. You came in through the hatch? Yes, Jonah says. Tower is down, but the hatch was buried, not destroyed. We uncovered it. Then the infected have not found it, Rollins mutters. Good. That buys a little more time. You said the door is welded from the outside, I call. So how are you talking to us? There is a shuffling sound within, a clank of metal against something hard. The vent, he says. There is a maintenance opening that leads to the duct alcove. I ran a length of conduit through it. Better acoustics than shouting through steel. I glance up. Above the door, the vent grill is slightly bent downward at one corner. You alone in there? Jonah asks. Now I am, Rollins replies. No humor in his voice this time. Used to be 7 of us. Officers did not like that we had opinions about their math. Eventually, opinions ran out of air. The bluntness lands harder than any shouted accusation. I picture the word depleted scratched into metal on another door and feel a cold crawl in places armor does not reach. You killed them, Mateo blurts before catching himself. No, Rollins says. That was the beauty of it. I did not have to kill anyone. Harris sealed us in, convinced we were the threat. Then the vents started acting up on their own. His own commands turned on him. He should have double-checked the code. You sabotaged the vents from in there? I ask. From in here, from the duct access, from the console when I still had clearance, he says. At first it was just adjustments, a little less air for the officers, a little more for the enlisted. Small corrections to unfair distributions. Then they tried to correct for population without asking us. Say what you want about the virus. Starvation is slower and more deliberate. I chose doors. He trails off. Look, Sergeant Miles, he says eventually. I do not care why you are here. I care that you are breathing and the fans are still moving. The system is fragile now. Filters are near failure. Bearings are worn. I kept it alive as long as I could, but I cannot reach everything from behind a welded door. You want to stay here, we need an agreement. The word agreement makes my shoulders tighten. Deals in this world rarely favor both sides. What kind of agreement? Jonah asks. You cut me out, Rollins says. You open this door, give me some water, and you do not shoot me. In return, I keep this bunker breathing. You are not trained to maintain this system, not properly. You can read screens and tug on vents, but when something deeper goes wrong, you will be guessing. I can tune it, I can stretch your fuel, but I am not doing it from a cell. Hannah shifts uneasily. He strangled people, she whispers, or helped. He also kept the generator running until today, Mateo whispers back. We would not even be here if he walked away. I step closer to Jonah's shoulder. He is right about the system, I say quietly. There is a lot here I do not understand. One wrong command, and we could starve the upper levels of air without realizing. Jonah breathes slowly through his mask, thinking. When he finally speaks, his voice is measured. Rollins, you tampered with ventilation in occupied sectors, he says. People died because of your adjustments. That is not a question, Rollins replies. But yes. You did this while no one in here showed infection, Jonah says. Yes, Rollins says. If the virus had reached us, we would all be dead now. Instead, we were dying by ration slip. I adjusted the schedule. Hannah closes her eyes for a moment. Her fingers tighten on her rifle sling until her knuckles pale. We are 4, Jonah says. We cannot afford to take in a 5th who thinks that way. Then you can leave, Rollins says sharply. Seal the hatch on your way out. In a week, the filters will fail. The generator will choke. You will be back on the surface, sleeping in ditches and hoping the wind keeps your scent off the dead. Or you can be practical. I am not asking for friendship. I am asking for an exchange of services. The bluntness drains some of the argument from the air. He is not pleading, he is bargaining. That makes him more dangerous and more useful at the same time. I catch Jonah's eye. We can control his access, I say. Open the door, disarm him if he has weapons. Keep him in a section with vents we can monitor and doors we control. Let him work in life support only when someone is watching. And if he decides 4 mouths are still too many, Hannah asks. Then we watch the numbers, I say. We keep manual indicators in our rooms. Candles, matches. If the air starts to thin, the flames will tell us before the console does. We do not sleep all at once anymore. Not completely. We already planned that. Jonah looks at the welded seam along the door, then at each of us. One by one, we nod or shake our heads. Mateo nods without much hesitation. We need him, he says. Hannah hesitates longer, then gives a short, reluctant nod. We need his knowledge, she says. Not him, but they come together. I nod as well. The math is ugly, but the alternative is uglier. Rollins, Jonah says. We are going to cut this weld. You come out slow, hands open, no tools, no weapons. You will drink under supervision, and then you will take us through every critical system. Any attempt to adjust vents without our consent will be taken as a threat. Inside, something scrapes against metal. Understood, Rollins says, but you should know, Sergeant, that sometimes the vents will need adjustment you will not like. Air is resources. Sooner or later, you will face the same numbers Harris did. We will face them together, Jonah says, not behind each other's backs. Cutting the weld takes longer than I want it to. We do not have a proper torch, only a battery-powered saw with a half-dull blade we found in a maintenance locker. The noise grinds its way through the corridor, echoing off concrete and steel. It feels far too loud. Each spark that leaps from the blade to the floor snaps in my nerves. We take turns, swapping out when arms start to tremble from the effort. The weld line is uneven, some parts thick, others barely more than a smear of metal. Whoever sealed this door wanted it shut, but either did not have time or did not have skill for a perfect job. Rollins talks while we work. Not constantly, but enough that his presence becomes more real. He asks about the surface very little. When he does, his questions are precise. How far did you travel to get here? What is the ratio of infected to living in the nearest town? Any organized forces still broadcasting? We answer briefly, not giving more detail than necessary. He fills the silence with stories of mechanical failures, filter improvisations, and power ration schedules. He talks about the bunker as if it is a patient he has been keeping alive against its own will. By the time the last section of weld is cut, sweat darkens the collar of my shirt under the mask. The air tastes of hot metal and battery off-gassing. Jonah tests the wheel. It resists for a moment, then turns. When he pulls, the door shifts an inch and then sticks. He sets his shoulder against it and pushes harder. Rust and old paint crack. The gap widens. A smell wafts out that has nothing to do with the wounded weld. Stale sweat, unwashed fabric, and confinement. Not rot. That detail matters. Back, Jonah orders. Give him space to step out. We form a half circle around the door, weapons low but ready. The first thing I see of Rollins is his hand. It grips the edge of the doorframe, fingers narrow and pale under grime. No weapon, just calluses and grease embedded in the creases. Then he steps into the light. He is older than I expected, hair gone mostly white and tied back in a small knot. His beard is short and uneven, trimmed with a knife by the looks of it. His bunker coveralls hang loose on a frame that has lost a lot of weight. His eyes, though, are sharp. They flick from face to face, from rifle to mask to console map on the wall behind us. He raises both hands to shoulder level, palms out. As agreed, he says. Hannah thrusts a metal cup toward him, filled from a nearby water drum. He takes it greedily but pauses before drinking, as if waiting for permission. Go ahead, Jonah says. Rollins tilts his head back and drains the cup in several long swallows. Water runs down his chin. He wipes it with the back of his wrist and lets out a slow breath. Thank you, he says. The word sounds unfamiliar in his mouth. We search his compartment next. He does not protest. Inside barracks C3, the bunks stand in neat rows, blankets stripped from most. One corner has been converted into a small workshop with pieces of ducting, filter housing, and hand-drawn diagrams tacked to the wall. A makeshift calendar marks days in rough pencil strokes. The last mark is from 3 days ago. We heard you through that plate, I say, nodding toward the cutout in the door. Thought it would take longer to attract your attention, he replies. Most people are afraid of welded doors. You are either desperate or stubborn. Both, Matteo says. We find no guns, only tools. Wrenches, screwdrivers, wire, spare bolts. One small blade in his boot, which he surrenders without fuss. Feel better? He asks when we finish. Some, Jonah says. Now we see if your mouth matches your skills. The rest of the day becomes a tour of the bunker's lungs. Rawlins moves with purpose, despite his worn frame. He points out access panels we missed, secondary dampers hidden behind equipment, bypasses he installed under pressure years ago. He criticizes some of his own work as he goes, muttering about shortcuts he regrets but had no choice over. He shows us how to read the deeper diagnostics on the console, how to recognize when a filter cartridge is lying about its remaining life, what sounds mean imminent bearing failure versus harmless resonance. At the main intake, he climbs a ladder to a hatch we assumed was sealed and opens it a crack. Cold air rushes in, carrying forest scents and a faint hint of smoke from somewhere distant. He squints at the sky through the narrow gap, then shuts it and spins the bolts. Infected have passed over this hill, he says, more than once. I saw them through that slit, long chains of them, wandering with no direction, following sound or scent only when it is strong. No one has tried the hatch, though. Camouflage held. Why did you stay? Hannah asks at one point as he adjusts a valve. You could have left when your officers did, whenever that was. He tightens the valve and studies the gauge. Where would I go? He asks finally. Up there. I am just another old man with a wrench. Down here, I am the difference between breathable air and a concrete tomb. Some people fight the infected. I fought corrosion and bad decisions. And the people you suffocated, she says. His hand stills on the valve wheel. He does not look at her. I misjudged, he says quietly. I thought I could force Harris to adjust his plans without killing anyone. But systems lag. Air moves slow. By the time he saw what was happening in those compartments, it was late for some. He sealed me down there after that. Said if I liked confined spaces so much I could have one. He lets go of the wheel. I am not asking you to forgive it. I am telling you that without me, your odds here shrink. Hannah does not reply. The days that follow settle into a new rhythm. We establish zones. The upper level becomes living space. We turn one barracks into shared quarters, another into storage. The ops center and life support room stay off limits to anyone not on watch or maintenance duty. Sector C remains mostly closed except for maintenance checks and occasional visits to the medical annex. We do not open any welded doors marked depleted. Rawlins sleeps in a small room near life support, where we can keep an eye on his comings and goings. He does not argue. I suspect he prefers proximity to his machines over privacy anyway. We create a schedule. Generator checks, filter inspections, patrols up the ladder to the hatch to listen for surface movement. Once we hear distant gunfire carried thinly through the intake. Short, controlled bursts, then nothing. No one speaks for a while after that. Fear in the bunker does not come as sudden jolts. It accumulates in small ways. The way the lights flicker a little longer each time the generator kicks under a load. The way the air sometimes feels marginally heavier in one corner of a room until Rawlins adjusts a valve. The way we all glance at the CO2 readings on the console whenever someone laughs harder than usual, as if the extra breath might tip the balance. We stop sleeping deeply. Each of us wakes at least once per night, listening for a change in the hum. The bunker talks if you learn the language. Vents hiss differently when settings change. The generator coughs slightly before settling. Distant metal ticks as it cools. In that environment, small anomalies stand out. The first one arrives on the 5th day. I am in the ops center, going through old mission files. Not because we need them, but because the human eye and mind crave stories, even in technical form. After hours in the bunker, the thought that once there were coordinated operations, planned routes, and call signs feels almost unreal. The console chimes softly. Not the harsh alarm tone we associated with filter issues, but a gentle notification ping. I look up. On the environmental panel, a small warning icon appears over Sector B, Corridor 6. CO2 levels slightly elevated. Vent flow lower than expected. Timestamp, now. I frown and cross to the life support room. Rollins is there already, standing with one hand on the main manifold and the other on a small piece of paper where he keeps handwritten notes. He looks up as I enter. "You saw it?" "Yes," I say. "What did you do?" "I did nothing," he replies. He nods toward the panel. Damper B6 just shifted on its own. Commands on the console show no input. That means either the actuator is failing or there is an obstruction in the duct. He flips a switch and brings up the damper status screen. The small icon for B6 flickers between open and partially closed. The system is trying to set one position and getting another. Could it be sabotage? I ask, the word tasting familiar and unpleasant on my tongue. It could be metal fatigue, Rollins says. Not every failure is a conspiracy, despite what Harris thought near the end. But it could be sabotage, I repeat. He looks at me properly this time. His eyes are tired, but there is steel in them. If I wanted you dead, he says, I would not start with a soft adjustment in a corridor. I would turn this key. He taps the empty slot where the purge key used to sit, and I would have kept the key. We both stare at the vacant keyhole. Where is that key? I ask. Last I saw, Rollins says slowly, Harris wore it on a chain around his neck. He said it reminded him that control ultimately rested with him, not with the machines or the engineers. When he locked us in, he still had it. After that, I do not know. His body? I ask. Never saw it, Rollins says. He sealed himself in C Command with his personal guard and some staff. From the vent taps I heard for a while, he was still barking orders until the tap sound stopped. That door is one of the welded ones you wisely did not open. So the key might be in a room we will never enter. I look back at the panel. The warning over B6 persists, but numbers are not climbing fast. Obstruction is more likely, Rollins says. Rodent nest, debris, dust cake. It happens when a system runs for this long without full maintenance. Then we clear it, I say. He grimaces. Of course we do. You have the smaller frame. Congratulations. You are our duct crawler. That is how I end up on my stomach in a narrow metal tube a short time later. Shoulders scraping the sides. Flashlight clenched in my teeth. Jonah and Mateo hold the access hatch open behind me. Rollins kneels beside it, giving directions that echo strangely in the confined space. The smell in here is concentrated dust and old metal, but the flow of air against my face tells me the system is still moving. 3 turns and a junction, he calls. You should feel the bend toward the right after the second seam. B6 damper assembly is there. If you see anything furry, stop and back out slowly. Do not push it deeper. I grunt acknowledgement and keep moving. The duct is barely wider than my shoulders. My elbows scrape each time I shift forward. The metal creaks a little under my weight, but holds. On the way, I pass small circular cutouts capped with mesh, secondary vents that feed into rooms. The mesh is coated in dust. I try not to think about how much of that dust is skin flakes from people who breathed this air before us. After what feels longer than it likely is, my hand brushes against something solid ahead. I stop and adjust the flashlight. The damper assembly blocks most of the duct cross-section. One of its blades is stuck halfway, the edge lodged against a mass of fibrous material. At first, I think it is some kind of insulation. Then I see the small bones. "Mouse nest," I call back, voice muffled. Or what is left of one. Took out the actuator's range. "Can you clear it?" Rollins calls. "Yes," I say, though the thought of pulling apart something that lived and died in this metal throat makes my skin crawl. I wedge the flashlight against a seam and reach in with both hands. The nest comes apart under my fingers, dry and fragile. Bones crumble, dust rises. I cough, then focus on pulling every piece free until the blade edge is clear. When I finish, I back away slowly, wiping my hands on my pants. Back in the life support room, the warning icon over B6 fades after a few minutes. Vent flow returns to nominal. CO2 levels stabilize. "See?" Rollins says. "Sometimes a mouse is just a mouse." "Sometimes," I say. The incident should reassure me. It should prove that not every glitch is deliberate, that the bunker is a real structure with real mechanical quirks. Instead, it reminds me how many places something could go wrong without us noticing, how many meters of duct hide beyond even Rollins' knowledge. Our trust in Rollins does not grow quickly. It is measured in tasks completed without incident, in nights where the air stays steady, in small moments where he chooses transparency over quiet adjustments. He starts offering suggestions rather than making changes directly. "If we turn this valve 7 degrees, we get better flow to your sleeping quarters," he says, but waits for Jonah's nod before touching it. He refuses a weapon when Jonah offers one for patrols. "I dealt enough quiet damage," he says. "If something needs shooting, one of you can handle it." We catch him once staring at one of the welded doors for a long time, fingers flexing at his sides. When he notices us watching, he shakes his head and walks away. The infected remain a distant presence. We hear them sometimes through the intake. Muffled shuffling, occasional impact against rock when one stumbles down the slope. Once, faint moans drift in, layered and many. A crowd passing overhead. We lower our voices and dim the lights during those times, as if sound alone could travel up the hidden shaft and give us away. There is comfort in the steel above, but there is also a trap. Every day we stay, we invest more of our safety in systems that can fail without warning. Every day we let Rollins adjust those systems. We tangle our survival with a man who once decided some lives were worth less air. The realization settles slowly, but once it does not move. It is Jonah who raises the topic first. We are in the mess, bowls of reheated ration stew in front of us. The air feels thicker than usual tonight, though the console shows normal numbers. Maybe it is just the moisture from the boiling pot. "I have been thinking about timing," he says, spoon paused halfway to his mouth. "Timing for what?" Matteo asks. "Leaving," Jonah says. The word hangs in the air longer than the steam from the stew. "Leave the bunker?" Hannah asks. "We just made this place habitable." Jonah nods. "Yes, and that is exactly why someone else will eventually find it. If the infected thin over time, if more survivors start moving again, any pattern of traffic near this hill increases the chance of discovery. We can lock it behind us or try to hold it against whoever comes. Both choices carry weight. "We could stay for the winter," Matteo says. "Use the time to rest, stock up, get stronger, then leave when travel is safer." "That is one option," Jonah agrees. "But every day we rely on this system. We accept that a mechanical failure or a single bad decision could kill us without warning. On the surface, danger is visible. You can see the infected coming. You can see a storm building. Down here, the threat is in numbers on a panel and the integrity of filters we cannot easily replace. He looks at me. Eli, you have been closer to these systems than anyone but Rollins. How much life do you think they have left? I consider my answer carefully. If nothing major breaks, months, I say. Maybe longer if we reduce power draw and cycle sections. But the filters are already past their intended lifespan. The generator is overdue for a real overhaul we cannot perform with what we have. Rollins has kept it running through creativity and luck. And when his luck runs out? Jonah asks. I have no answer that does not sound thin. Hannah sets her spoon down. You are talking about walking back out into a world we know is full of infected and emptier than before. Yes, Jonah says, but we would walk out rested, better supplied, and with knowledge of routes and conditions gathered from the radios we have monitored. We would not be the same four who stumbled on a buried hatch under a collapsed tower. We would be better prepared. The bunker is a bridge, not a home. Mateo stares at his bowl. And Rollins? He asks. Rollins decides for himself, Jonah says quietly. He has tied his identity to this place. I do not think he leaves even if we ask him. That is his choice. Ours is whether to stay chained to the same air. We do not decide that night. We let the question sit with us through sleep cycles and maintenance shifts. It colors how I watch Rollins work, how I listen to the fans, how I react when a tiny fluctuation appears on the panel. One early morning, during my watch, the CO2 indicator in our sleeping quarters ticks up by a fraction. Not enough to alarm the system, but enough that a small red triangle appears beside the room label. I go to the life support room. Rollins is there, rubbing his eyes. He looks at the panel and immediately adjusts a valve. The numbers drift back down. Just people breathing in a closed space, he says. You had the door sealed tighter than usual. I can increase turnover rate for that compartment if it helps your nerves. He says it without malice, but the implication hits me anyway. Our comfort depends on settings we do not fully understand, on the attention of an old engineer whose priorities have never fully aligned with ours. When Jonah calls another meeting in the ops center later that day, my answer is ready. We should leave, I say. Not instantly, but soon. We use this place to build up reserves. Then we go. We document everything we can about the systems and leave that for anyone who finds this place after us. But we do not trust our entire future to vents and an aging generator. Hannah looks torn. I hate the idea of leaving walls and filters, she says, but I hate the idea of waking up to silent fans more. Out there, at least, if something is going to kill us, we might see it first. Mateo nods slowly. If we stay, we are in a cage, he says. A comfortable one. A cage that will rust around us until there is no door left to open. On the road, we might die faster. But we might also find something better. Or at least something that does not depend on one key that is lost, and one man who is tired. Jonah listens, arms crossed. When he speaks, there is no joy in his voice, only decision. Then we leave, he says. We set a date. We prepare like this is a mission, not a flight. We take what we can carry and hide what we cannot, so it is not easy for raiders to use this place against others. He looks toward the life support room, where Rollins is adjusting yet another valve in his endless battle against entropy. And we tell him, he adds, honestly. Rollins takes the news with a blank expression at first. Then a thin smile comes, without much humor. I wondered when you would reach that conclusion, he says. You are not the first to think it. You might be the first with enough discipline to actually walk away. You could come, Hannah offers, surprising me. He shakes his head. Out there, I am useless. My knees are bad, my lungs are worse, and I have spent too long listening to machines, not people. Down here, I still matter. Every adjustment I make gives someone a little more time. Maybe not you, but someone. Someone? I echo. He nods toward the radio room. You think you are the only ones who found this hill? There were others. Some stayed a night in the upper level and moved on. Some begged to be let in, and I refused. Not enough supplies, too many risks. Others tried to take the hatch by force. They did not account for the angle of the slope and the way sound carries through that intake. The infected did the rest. He looks back at the panel. If you leave, I will keep this bunker on standby. Maybe someday it will be safe enough for more than 4 to live here again. Or maybe I will die at this console, and the next person will find my skeleton slumped over the purge switch. Either way, this is where I finish. His certainty is unsettling and oddly comforting at the same time. There is a clarity in someone who has chosen his ground, even if that ground is a buried concrete block. We spend the next week preparing. We inventory and repack supplies. We trade bulk for portability, water jugs for collapsible bladders, canned food for lighter rations. We draw maps from the mission files, marking potential routes and hazards mentioned in old reports. We copy down frequencies from a faded list on the radio console. Maybe some of them still mean something. We leave behind detailed notes on the environmental system. Rollins adds his own scribbled warnings, drawing arrows to valves and filters that must be watched. We tape the pages near the console, laminate them with plastic from old folders. At night, I make one more recording on the public message function, using the same microphone that captured Harris's warning. This is Eli Marcus, civilian survivor, I say into the mic. My voice sounds strange in the speakers, echoing through the empty ops center. We found this bunker after the collapse, years after Lieutenant Colonel Harris recorded his message. We lived here for some weeks. The systems still function, thanks to Chief Rollins. But they are old. Filters are near end of life. Generator is tired. Treat this place as a way station, not a permanent refuge. I describe the welded doors, the risks of tampering with vents without understanding, the importance of checking manual dampers, the missing purge key. I mention how Harris's fear of sabotage and Rollins' reaction to ration plans turned the bunker into a quiet battlefield long before the infected ever reached the hatch. Air is as much a weapon as any firearm down here, I say. Remember that when you make your choices, and remember that the person fixing your filters has power you cannot see. Respect it or control it, but do not ignore it. I end with coordinates relative to landmarks that still exist on maps, in case anyone listening needs more than a buried hatch under a fallen tower to find hope. Then I save the recording into the system's queue after Harris's message, so anyone who accesses public logs will hear both sides of the bunker's story. The morning we leave, the air feels clearer than usual. Maybe that is just awareness sharpened by the weight of packs on our shoulders. We meet in the access chamber under the hatch. Jonah checks the ladder one more time, tugging on each rung. Hannah taps the hinges, listening for any hint of structural weakness. Mateo adjusts the straps on his radio pack. Rollins stands in the corridor just beyond, hands clasped behind his back. Filters are set to mid-range, he says. Intake quiet. External readings show no major pressure changes. That means no storms rolling in. It is as good a time as any you will get. I nod. Thank you for the lessons. Do not waste them, he says. Hannah steps forward impulsively and holds out her hand. Rollins hesitates, then shakes it. His grip is firm despite the tremor in his fingers. "If you change your mind," she says, "and you hear our voices on a radio somewhere, call us." "I do not think my path crosses yours again," he replies. "But if it does, I hope it is over sound choices, not clogged vents." He almost smiles. Matteo gives him a small salute, half sincere and half teasing. Jonah nods once, a soldier's acknowledgement. Then we climb. The hatch opens heavier than it did when we first arrived. Dirt has shifted in the days since. We shoulder it aside and sunlight knifes in, bright enough to make my eyes water. Fresh air hits my face, sharp and alive in a way filtered air never is. It carries the smell of trees, damp earth, and distant rot. But it is honest. We haul ourselves out one by one, then pull the hatch closed behind us, brushing dirt and debris back over it until it looks again like just another scar on the hillside. The tower's broken ribs reach into the sky, black against the pale clouds. Down below, the bunker hums on, sealed and patient. We shoulder our packs and start down the service road, boots crunching on gravel. None of us look back for long. The bunker was safety and trap in one. We walk away with stronger legs, heavier packs, and a sharper understanding of how far people will go when the air inside walls begins to feel smaller than the world outside. Somewhere behind us, in a concrete room lit by tired LEDs, an old engineer watches gauges and listens to fans, guarding the breath of a place that may outlive us all. On the surface, the wind shifts, and the sounds of the infected carry faintly from some distant valley. We adjust our path and keep moving, drawing our next breath from open sky.